Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Courtroom Insider. I'm Nate Eaton from EastIdahoNews.com. So glad you are with me tonight. We have a fascinating conversation coming up here with a guy who reached out to me. His name is Andrew Dodge, and he has interviewed over 300 people, and many of them are people in prison, convicted murderers, I should say, on death row, people who are being executed, people who are serving life sentences. He's spoken with survivors, forensics, mental health professionals, and some of these conversations he's done are just fascinating in a way. You don't want to glorify killers, at least I don't want to glorify killers. You don't want to give them a platform, but in a way, it's interesting to hear their stories, the way they think, to hopefully recognize signs in others and maybe prevent other similar tragedies, but also just to kind of figure out where things went wrong or where they come up with these ideas. Anyway, we'll get into that in just a minute. Would love to know where you're watching from, and if you have any questions. There is a little bit of news. I'll get you caught up kind of on the news of the day with the Charlie Kirk, the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robinson now has an attorney, and she knows what she's doing. This is an experienced attorney who is well-known in the legal system. She's handled other high-profile cases. Her name is Catherine Nestor. The Utah County Commission down in Provo, Utah, appointed the attorney yesterday. They also passed $1 million in staffing additions. It is crazy how much these cost. You might think, oh, $1 million, that's a ton. For Daybell in Idaho alone, before Chad's trial, I believe that $3.6 million had already been spent. You got to fly in experts, you got to test evidence, you got to do all sorts of stuff. And the state, basically the taxpayers, you and I, will now be paying, the taxpayers of Utah will now be paying for Tyler Robinson's prosecutor, the prosecution, and his defense attorney. The commission approved Catherine Nestor as legal counsel. She's represented defendants in other high-profile cases, including Corey Richens. She's the woman accused of murdering her husband, and I might be headed out to Utah to cover that one next year with you here on Courtroom Insider, and Dr. Kirk Moore, who's a plastic surgeon. He was federally indicted on charges of distributing fake vaccine cards, but the charges were dismissed by U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. Normally the commission doesn't have meetings like this, obviously, mid-year, but they said that this wasn't typical to add staffing mid-year, but because of the level of service expected in the high-profile case, they needed to. So the $1 million will help pay for 2 more full-time deputy county attorneys in the attorney's office and 2 full-time paralegal positions. So they are staffing this up. And now we will see what happens. It will be interesting to see in the Luigi Mangione case, we talked about this, they're asking that death penalty should be taken off the table because they're saying that high-profile people, politicians, have been publicizing the fact that he should be executed or things like that. And so they're arguing that is an issue. It will be interesting to see what type of things Catherine Nestor files in her case with Robinson going forward. And if this goes all the way to trial, they are seeking the death penalty, and they could use it as a negotiation tactic to take death penalty off the table and give him life in prison without parole. And then it's settled. There's no trial. I know many people wanted to go to trial. So we'll see. It's early. I mean, this shooting happened 2 weeks ago, so it's very early in the case. But he does have an attorney now, so he will be able to meet with her. And going forward, she will appear with him at these court trials. So that is the latest on that. Now I want to get to tonight's. The name of the podcast that Andrew Dodge runs, YouTube channel, is called Unforbidden Truth. He's been interviewing convicted killers for 12 years, including Teresa Knorr. She murdered 2 of her 6 kids and shot her first husband. She's been married, I think, 3 or 4 times. Martha Freeman killed her husband with her boyfriend, who was secretly living in the house. Donald Middlebrooks, he's on death row in Tennessee for killing a 14-year-old black teenager in 1987. It was a racial crime, a racial motivation. Christopher Bennett, he's serving 1,800 years in prison for killing his mother's boyfriend, Vincent McDorman, and all sorts of other interviews. He's got them all on there. He's fascinated to talk with these people, those who are behind bars. And I just want to toss over to our conversation. Again, his name is Andrew Dodge, host of Unforbidden Truths. All right. So, Andrew, first question, how did you start this whole idea of contacting inmates, interviewing them, and then, posting their interviews for the world to see?
Okay, so do you want me to start with like how I got into this first?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so my dad is a retired cop who was later a detective, and my late stepmother was a 911 dispatcher, right? So growing up, most people, you know, had like a quote unquote normal childhood, learning about like Disney and, Winnie the Pooh and stuff like that. I always learned about true crime. My dad would bring home stories about, cases he would work on. My stepmom would talk about stories of calls she would take as a 911 dispatcher. So I've always been immersed in true crime since I was young. Ever since I could read, I read true crime books. I've been into horror movies, stuff like that. So in 2010, I reached out to a serial killer by the name of Philip Jablonski. And funny enough, he was the first one I visited in person. So it wasn't about till like 2015, 2016 that I started podcasting with a podcast that's no longer around. It's called Criminal Perspective, and we teamed up and we were like, hey, we both interview inmates. We should basically just bring these to the public so other people can, I guess, binge this content. Like because we interviewed inmates. His name was Chris Duet, and we. I went around the country visiting prisoners. Like I visited Philip Jablonski, Wesley Shermantine, Jack Spillman. I was supposed to visit the Hillside Strangler, but that never happened. And long story short, I just thought it would be interesting to bring these interviews to the public, so they can listen to them and hear what I'm hearing, which is kind of mind blowing sometimes. So I just thought it'd be cool to have the public be able to, hear what I hear and, share my experiences with the public from visitations to interviews with inmates. Not only inmates, I interview, survivors of violent crime and professionals in the forensics, law enforcement, and mental health field as well.
Take me back to that first time. I mean, you reached out to the guy when he actually agreed to meet with you. What were you thinking, and what was it like walking into those prison doors?
When I first reached out to him for a visit, I was like, this guy's not going to visit me. I mean, I don't know if people can actually visit serial killers. And sure enough, he was like, yeah, go ahead. He called me actually after the second letter and sent me three visitation forms. Actually, he wanted me to bring a couple friends, which nobody was willing to come with me, surprisingly, or not surprisingly. So yeah, when I showed up to the visit, it was very strange going through the walls. It was San Quentin State Prison at the time. They no longer have death row there because it's dorms for regular inmates. But I was walking through the walls, barbed wire on the fences, guards walking around, canines walking around. I was pretty nervous because I've never been to a prison before, and I was scared to be honest because I didn't know what to expect. I was visiting a guy that killed five women. And when I first got there, he held his hand out to shake my hand, and his entire hand had open sores. He was bleeding. So when I shook his arm and was like, "Nice to meet you," because I
Yeah.
didn't want to touch his hand because he was just so disgusting. And when I got in the cage, we were like across the table from one another, and it was real awkward because I didn't know how to greet him. I didn't, I wasn't like, nice to meet you. I was like, hello,
Right.
I'm Andrew. He's like, I know, so
So, what was your pitch to him? Like, why did you tell him you wanted to meet with him?
I just told him that I wanted to pick his brain more or less. And I knew that he was more infamous in the true crime community when it came to like he loved like doing artwork for people. He loved like sending artwork to his pen pals, and he loved being on the phone. He got off on his crimes a lot, so I knew that he would visit. I just wasn't sure what he was willing to and not willing to talk about. And basically, it just snowballed from there. after him, I visited like 4 or 5 other people. Then 4 or 5 turned into like half a dozen, and I'm visiting a female mass murderer later on this year here in Washington. So it just almost 16 years later, I'm still visiting inmates and interviewing inmates and talking to inmates on the phone almost daily, you know.
And do you still kind of reach out to them with like a, I guess now it's all digital mainly in these prisons and these jails where it's JPay or, getting out, things like that. Do you just send them kind of a form letter or like, hey, my name is so and so, I have a podcast, you want to talk to me?
Yeah, pretty much. And what's funny is sometimes I don't have to reach out to them. Sometimes they'll reach out to me. Like, for instance, not that long ago, there was an inmate, a double murderer, that called me and was like, hey, I got your number from so and so. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. What's up? Like, you want to do an interview? And he's like, yeah, I would love to. So I've networked with a lot of prisoners through other prisoners. It sounds kind of weird, but like they trust me because I let them speak. You know, I don't cut them off. I don't sandbag them in any way, shape, or form. So basically, I'm trustworthy to a lot of prisoners, high profile prisoners. So I basically just get interviews out of a lot of them. The ones that don't want to do interviews will talk to me like off the record, and if they don't want to talk to me, they'll be like, I have this friend or I have this friend that I was locked up with for like 20, 30 years. They'll want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it, you know.
So why do you think they do it? Why do you think so many are willing to talk?
Well, I think it's two reasons. One, people like let's say like serial killers, mass murderers, spree killers that are like decades old, you know, their cases are like decades old. I think they just want to be talked about again. Some of them, believe it or not, get like groupies and pen pals after I, air interviews. Like uh who was it? Jonathan Cruz, the Purge killer, right, in Indiana. After I aired my interview with him, he's like, man, there's so many women that started writing me after we did this interview, and a lot of them are sending me money. They're sending me, promiscuous photos. So and the second reason is a lot of them claim to be innocent, and a lot of them think that if I do interviews with them, which I'll do interviews with anybody, whether they admit guilt or they claim to be innocent, they think that somebody's going to hear their story and maybe try to, work on their case or try to get it out there to where like they're innocent and they because nobody wants to die in prison, you know.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's both reasons, either to just be talked about or to get groupies or pen pals or to have somebody feel bad enough to where they'll try to help them and get out of prison or whatever, you know.
When you go and do these interviews, you mentioned you do some in person. I imagine you do some on the phone. How do you logistically get, a recorder in the jail? I imagine there's strict rules with some states versus others.
So I do them all over the phone. It's there's a
Oh,
lot of red tape when it comes to like doing them in prisons.
yeah.
I've been successful yet. I'm trying to, but there's so much red tape. You gotta, like some states, you gotta contact the warden. You gotta
Yeah.
contact the payers. Sometimes even like state representatives, depending on who it is. I mean, of course, like they got to have so many officers there, and I'm sure you know that prisons are so understaffed, and there's so many units that are shut down from time to time that some counts like never get done daily because they're just so understaffed, and I mean they're
Right.
understaffed, overworked, so.
So I see. So you might go and visit them, but the actual interview you would later do on the phone or before. You might just go meet them just to meet them.
Right, right, right. Like for instance, later on this year, I'm going to visit Michelle Anderson, the Carnation. She's a mass murderer from Carnation, Washington. Her and her boyfriend killed her family on Christmas or Christmas Eve, like 10, 15 years ago. And I just go because it's interesting to me to visit in person, and I get more of like a they'll talk about more in person than they will over the phone because obviously phone calls are recorded. I don't have a recorder with me inside the prison, so they're willing to talk about things that they're not normally going to speak about in an interview,
Have you ever had any confess for the first time to you?
Yeah, you know what's crazy is there's a guy by the name of Cecil Davis. He was well, now he's considered a serial killer here in Washington State. He died a few years ago, but I did an interview with him, and at the very end, I said something like, "Is there any crimes out there that you're responsible for that nobody knows about?" And he's like, "Well, Miss Georgia, I didn't kill her. She really liked me, yada yada yada. And he basically went on to for like 5 minutes about why he didn't kill her. And the granddaughter reached out to me of the woman who was killed. She was essayed and killed. She was a older woman. I think she was like in her 80s or 90s. And the granddaughter contacted me. I actually just spoke to her today, and she's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you got a confession out of Cecil, who killed my grandmother in the I think it was the late '80s or early '90s." And I'm like, "Well, he didn't really confess." And she's like, "No, I take that as a confession because he went on and on and on about why he didn't kill her." And she contacted the Tacoma Police Department, and they had partial DNA on file. And I guess they took my interview and used it as partial evidence, and they closed the case. And it was a cold case. The case had been open for the longest time, like 30, 40 something years. And it got closed, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago. And they
Hmm.
credited my interview and the partial DNA on file. And I kick myself every day because Cecil called me 2 days before he passed away. And I kept ignoring his call because he kept asking me for money. He kept asking me to come visit him, and I just didn't want to. And I regret every day not picking up his call because I really wanted to know what he had. He was probably going to yell at me for that case being closed because they went to interview him. It was a big ordeal. They took him out of population and went to interview him and tried to get a confession out of him, which he denied. But yeah, I'd say that's one of the most like interesting confessions that I've got, even though he didn't confess. But he was basically like explaining why he didn't do it for over 5 minutes long, and like why would you bring up a cold case murder victim that you didn't kill, and why would you continue saying you didn't kill this person when you know you're a prime suspect in this murder. It was
Right.
interesting to say the least.
You alluded to one of the questions I have is a lot of times we'll get letters from inmates just randomly here at our newsroom, and a time or two I've called, and then you can't get them to stop calling. One, because they're hopeful that you can continue to put their case out there, or they need friends. It's their contact with the outside world. How do you manage that to where you're not on the phone 24/7 with these inmates?
Uh, I really don't.
Or are you? Are you just constantly getting these calls, and how do you keep them all straight?
Yeah, I constantly do get calls. Like, I'd say I talk to around 100 inmates a month, whether that's email, snail mail, on the phone, and video visits. But I try to limit calls to like once a day with some inmates. I mean, some of them will call back to back to back. I recently had one guy, he was on the Chris Hansen To Catch a Predator show. We did half an interview, and he literally would not stop calling me. So I had to threaten him like, look, if you don't stop calling, we're not going to do this interview. I'm just going to scrap it.
Mm.
He called probably 20 times in a row, and I was like, I can't talk right now. Kept calling, kept calling, kept calling. I emailed him, was like, look, if you don't stop, I'm gonna not only call the prison, have them block my number from your list, and then I'm gonna just scrap this interview for good. And he stopped calling, and I limit I like I'll just put my phone on do not disturb a lot, because I get calls all day long. I mean, California is the biggest state that I get calls out of, but I mean, I'm on Pacific time, so sometimes people will call me at like 3 or 4 in the morning that are in Michigan or New York, so I gotta always have my phone on silent or do not disturb because it just rings off the hook, and like I'll be with family. I'll be like, yeah, this serial killer's calling, or this mass murderer keeps trying to call. I'm sorry. So
Would you say that some of them have become like your friends, or you
um
become close with some of them?
I wouldn't say friends. I'd say, I mean, I've been talking to some of them for close to 15 years. Like, I'd say I have a good rapport with some of them. Like, for instance, the one that I've been talking to the most, of course, is Richard Allen Davis, the polyclass case in California, the three strikes law. I talk to him a lot, and I'm close with him, but I would never say that I'm friends with him. I have a close rapport with him, and he doesn't really call many people other than myself and like a few pen pals. And I wouldn't say I'm really friends with any of them. I've befriended some in the sense of wanting to get interviews or learn more about their life or learn more about their case, but I don't consider any of them like my friends. At the end of the day, because I know, I mean, they're psychopaths, sociopaths, and I'm not going to let somebody into my personal life that could potentially cause devastation like they did to their victims, you know?
Hmm. Do you ever worry about your safety?
No, it's funny. People ask me that a lot. There was a guy. He's in prison. He's in federal prison for life. He has like 11 life sentences between Florida, Alabama, and California. His name is El Mano Negra, Jose Martinez. He's a cartel hitman, or he claims to be.
Hmm.
And I have a letter, the very first, or the second letter that he wrote me. Right, he drew me in a noose because he said you can ask me anything. So I said, how many murders did you commit? What states were you in? What was your method of execution? And there was one other question. I forget what I asked him. So he drew me in a noose and he's like, I think you're a police officer. My amigos are going to come see you soon. And he called me one time and like threatened to kill me. He said that he was going to find out where I went to school because he knew I went to college at the time. I just didn't tell him where. And they were going to wait outside the college and kidnap me and like torture and kill me. And
Oh
like,
my gosh.
no, good luck. Washington is very big, but he's mostly talked for them. He is talked for the most part. I mean, he's in prison for life, but that's the only time I've really felt like I didn't even really feel threatened. I just gotta. I thought it was more funny than anything because this guy is just he gets off on intimidating people. The BuzzFeed did an interview with him. I'm sure you might have seen it where he's like clicking his teeth the entire time and
Mm.
talking about all the murders he committed. But that's the only time I've really felt threatened or my safety has been like compromised. But for the most part, I don't really deal with a whole lot of gang members or cartel anymore because of him. And when I do, I'm very cautious on what I say. I don't make any promises I can't keep. I don't. I answer the phone when I can. I'll be like, call me at this time. I'll make sure that I can answer then because a lot of prisoners get upset when you you can't pick up the phone right away. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't. They forget that we have lives out here, and it's not just. I'm not just twiddling my thumbs waiting for Jose Martinez to call me.
You mentioned you talked with one of the Chris Hansen Predator guys. Are you looking at certain crimes that people commit? Is that why you'll reach out to them? For instance, murderers or people on death row, or is it just whoever is incarcerated who will talk to you?
Um, it's a little bit of both. I don't really talk to many pedophiles because I've got a lot of slack from my listeners for that, but the more high profile pedophiles I'll speak to, like Jean Pierre Wery, that's his name. He was like there's so many articles out there on him that he's one of the most top five most infamous on Chris Hansen's TV show, and I think he took three or four buses to have sex with a 13 or 14-year-old boy, and
Mm.
he's very interesting. He has dementia now too. He claims that he's gay and he's not um, a pedophile because he likes young boys, and I always argue with him like, no, you're a pedophile. You're not gay, and you like young boys. So, but I tend to draw the line at pedophiles unless they're high profile. But for the most part, I just stick to convicted murderers or violent criminals that don't have sex crimes against kids. I mean, every once in a while, I'll interview like a serial sex offender or you know pedophiles, depending on what the case may be. But I mean, I'm not really like discriminatory when it comes to interviewing prisoners. Like I said, unless they're pedophiles, and I really don't have much to learn from them. Like if they claim to be innocent and like there was eyewitnesses, evidence, this and that, I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna give them a platform because I'm just defeating the purpose of what I do.
Has there ever been one though where you've wondered, like, oh, maybe they really are innocent, or you've been able to do some research and say, maybe they are wrongfully incarcerated?
Yeah, 100%. Quincy Cross in Kentucky, I interviewed him basically his entire family, his co-defendants. He's been in the news a lot lately. I think 2020 or Dateline did something on him not that long ago. The murder of Jessica Kern in Mayfield, Kentucky. I actually went down there and met with the victim's family. The victim's family believes he's innocent. The entire community believes he's innocent. Actually, he was in jail supposedly at the time when this woman was raped and killed, and necrophilia was performed on her, and so much more. And I have a lot of documents on one of my drives that proves he's innocent, and he has a court date, I think, in October or November of this year, and he should be getting out if it's a decent judge. And there's a lot of police corruption. Um, Police were having sex with the underage witnesses. Evidence went missing. It's one of those cases that's just makes you scratch your head and like, why is this guy in prison? And two of his co-defendants took Alfred pleas. They would have never been convicted, in my opinion, if they actually took it to trial. But
Hmm.
both of them, they were scared after he got multiple life sentences, being the quote unquote ringleader. So it's that case for sure. I know three of the five are innocent that were convicted, and I'm friends with one of them. His name is Jeffrey Burton, and it breaks my heart that Quincy's still in there because he did not do that. He's innocent of rape, murder, everything they accused him of.
Yeah. I was going through your website, Andrew, and was fascinated that so many women too have talked. I don't know why. I mean, I just was. You have a lot of women inmates who are on death row who have killed their kids or killed their spouses or boyfriends or whatever. Do you find there's a different dynamic when you approach the women versus the men?
Yeah, there is. I got to talk to them longer than I do the men, and some women are like, while we do this interview or while I get to know you, if you talk to any other woman in here, like I'm done. So they're very possessive. They want me to just speak to them and nobody else until we're done with the interview. I've had so many of them flake on me because I reached out to other inmates and either in the past or at the time, and they're very possessive and just want me to speak to them and them only, and it's very strange,
Yeah.
and the men can care less. Like I talk to so many men in California, and they're like, I don't care who you talk to, it's just whatever, just do me right, and I'll tell you everything you want to know.
What do you say to the people that say you shouldn't give any of these guys and women a platform?
Well, I understand why people do say that, but I do feel that there are people in prison that are innocent at the end of the day. That I mean, I feel like everybody should have a platform, so the record can be set straight in the sense of, the media doesn't always get everything correct. There's things in cases that, get misconstrued or just, you know, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um,
All the facts don't come out. Thing are twisted.
right. Or sometimes people confess and there's not a motive. Like for instance, like the Delphi case. I'm really hoping I can get him one day because there's some cases where motive has not been given, and victims' families at the end of the day deserve closure. Like, for instance, Richard Allen Davis, for the longest time, he would not give a motive. And recently he told me that this was a kidnapping, the Polly Klaas case, and so many different other offenders have come out and told me, like, why they have done what they've done. And they wouldn't tell investigators, they wouldn't give the victims' families closure. I feel like victims' families do deserve closure, even if it's 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, even if some of them are not alive anymore, because some offenders like to play games, but I mean, at the same time, they just um, yeah, I feel that mostly just victims' families deserve closure, and I mean hearing it might upset them, but at the same time, they might hear something that will give them closure, like why did you kill my daughter? Because at the very end of the interviews, I'll say, what do you have anything else to say before we conclude this interview? And a lot of the time, they'll either express remorse, whether it's legit or not, or why they actually did what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see your point. I mean, it's a balancing act. I think if you put the same person on every single night to say whatever they want to say, that would be exploiting it and not serve a purpose. But I think that if you do interview these inmates, there can be a purpose too. And obviously, some of the victims don't want to hear it; they don't want to watch it, and that's fine. But others may want to. They want to hear every single thing possible out of the people. So, who's on your wish list? Who do you hope to interview?
Um, I'd say my top three are Gary Ridgway, Ed Kemper, and Joel Rifkin. I was supposed to interview Sam Little when he was alive, and we had scheduled something, but I don't know what happened. He fell through. There was a woman that was dictating like his quote unquote like life rights, book deals, things like that. So I really wish I could have interviewed him, but that fell through. But yeah, Ridgway, Kemper, and Rifkin are the three that I really would love to interview. But that's near impossible right now. I mean, Ridgway's basically dying of cancer. Kemper doesn't talk to anybody, and Rifkin is really reclusive too.
Interesting. So, and you said that you're talking with one or going to see one in Washington later this year. How often are you releasing the interviews?
So I try to release at least 2 to 3 a month. I work a day job. I work like 60 hours a week, so I try to balance between my day job and releasing interviews. Sometimes I'll release more. Sometimes I'll do lives too. So I'll do live interviews with not only offenders but like people in the, like I said, in the forensics, law enforcement, and mental health field, and surviving victims and family members of crime victims. So I'd say anywhere between like 2 to 5 a month, roughly.
Hmm. And do you have one? I hate it when people ask me this question, but I'm going to ask you. Do you have a favorite, one that'll always stick out to you?
I have two favorites. I can't just pinpoint one. So
Yeah.
Nico Jenkins, who's a spree killer from Nebraska, he's on death row right now. They're actually going to court to see if he is sane enough to execute. He gets forced injections, mental health injections, to make him quote unquote sane enough so they can kill him. And then Todd Colehep, who is a mass murderer and serial killer out of South Carolina. Those are my top two favorite interviews that I've recorded. Colehep is actually a 4-part interview, and he's the only serial killer that's ever told me like nothing is off limits. So it's almost 5 hours long. It's one of my most listened to interviews, and he did not hold back on anything, whether he was lying or not. I mean, that's up for people to determine. But yeah, those are my top two favorites.
Fascinating stuff. Andrew, where can people find you?
I'm on all podcast platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, literally anywhere you can listen to a podcast. Just search Unforbidden Truth Podcast and it'll pop up.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anything that you want to add?
Um, Not that I can think of at the moment. Thank you for getting back to me, and thank you for doing this interview. And I hope that people enjoy my interviews. And if anybody ever wants to suggest a case for me to reach out to somebody, feel free. I've had a lot of people suggest inmates for me to interview, and they've been pretty receptive. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Such fascinating stuff here that Andrew is doing on his podcast. Again, it's called Unforbidden Truth. I thank him for being here tonight. Also, I was thinking during that interview that if there are any of those cases that you want to look up, in addition to Andrew's podcast, go to newspapers.com. They are our sponsor, and just this week they have come in handy here in our newsroom because we're working on a current story, but that we needed reporting back from the early 2000s that is not archived on newspapers' websites, but newspapers.com had the stuff we needed, and they have the stuff you might need if you need to go in and do research on your personal family, on cases of interest, news stories from the past, photographs, anything like that. Valuable resource. We thank them for sponsoring Courtroom Insider. And again, it's newspapers.com. 7-day trial. If you haven't tried it, if you have, I'd love to hear your stories. You send them to me, and I really appreciate learning about what you've learned on newspapers.com. Such a great website. Thank you for being here. Here's where you can find me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. Always appreciate those of you who have subscribed. We have a lot of good content coming up. In fact, just next week, I don't know if I can announce it yet. Actually, I think I can. We're going to have on one of the sergeants who responded to the Las Vegas shooting back in 2017 at the concert with Jason Aldean. This was a sergeant. His story is riveting. The anniversary, the tragic anniversary of that shooting is coming up on October 1st. So he will be here to talk about his experience, what he's learned, and how he is helping officers and others in law enforcement deal with trauma and how they move forward without having their mental health completely screwed up the rest of their life. So he's going to be here. It's going to be a great interview. And then we have some other things planned for next week here on Courtroom Insider. So I hope you'll tune in, because I'll be here. Hope you're enjoying the programming. And if you have any ideas on stories that you think we should be covering or stories that you want me to look into, feel free to reach out to me on those social media channels, and I'll be happy to look into them and see what we can do. All right, everybody. Hope you have a great weekend. Fall's here. Fall is here. Wherever you're at watching, I guess if you're watching on the other side of the world, spring is there for you. But we're ready for fall, and I hope you have a good weekend, and we will see you next time on Courtroom Insider.